Hello, I'm Daniel, the founder of The Creative Classical Guitarist. I wanted to share with you the program that we have for 2022. I think it's one of the most comprehensive classical guitar curriculums out there. Obviously, the name suggests The Creative Classical Guitarist. The main purpose is to create new pieces for guitar and to teach you how to create your own compositions and arrangements. Last year alone, members of CCG composed and arranged upwards of 100 new works for the guitar. This year, we have two curriculums running simultaneously. A year one, which is more aimed at beginners and intermediate players, and then a year two syllabus, more aimed at advanced players and people who are experienced with composing. So with year one, just this month alone in January, we're looking at an introduction to composition, left-hand mechanics, major and minor scales, and preparing when learning pieces, preparation phase. So as the year progresses, we have different topics, different subjects each month. We have a different technical focus each month, different exercises to practice each month, and different phases of learning our pieces that we go through each month as well. By the end of the year, you'll have composed at least a handful of pieces. You'll have been through quite an array of technical focus. You'll have practiced through all sorts of things like scales, triads, chords, modulations, so on. And you'll have prepared your pieces very, very thoroughly using this 4-step system that I've developed. So that's an overview of year one, and year two is very similar except that the subjects are a little bit different. We have sight reading, practice, advanced composition course, 19th century style, and so on. And also 3 compositions at the end of year two: a fugue, a valse, and a landscapes piece, a piece that evokes the landscape you live in. And at the end of year one, we've got an allemande, a mazurka, and an etude. There's a lot going on. So what I thought I'd do is just share with you some of the work from January. We've only been 1 week into CCG so far, and there's already a lot happening, so I thought I'd share with you some of that work. The first thing I'd like to share with you is this piece by Jamal, who lives in the USA. And he wrote this around Christmas time, so he's well and truly ahead of the game, but I wanted to just show you this as an idea of what you can do in a fairly short amount of time. This piece means Memories of the Andes, and kind of has these different textures that kind of have very different moods, but retaining the same melody, the same tune. It's really very South American sounding melody at the start, very rhythmic, and then we go into some different textures. So here's an example. I'll just play a little bit of bits and pieces for you. So the opening. So yeah, really lively, beautiful tune. And then this B section, we have this much slower rendition of it. And then going to a tremolo. Really beautiful effects. So this is, a really well developed composition. It's still a draft, still in its draft stages, but I just wanted to share that with you as an example of the kind of work that's happening on CCG. Taking you backwards a little bit, one of the tasks that we have for the composition course is to separate the melody and the accompaniment of a composition. So this is a very well-known guitar piece, A Day in November by Leo Brouwer. And Lan one of CCG's members has started this task, separating the melody, you can see at the top, and the accompaniment at the bottom. So I'll play some of the original for you. And here is what it looks like separated. So we have the melody on the top and the accompaniment on the bottom. I'll play it again. This time you can see how the different parts function differently and how they also interact with each other. So really beautiful work there. You can see that Lan has identified we've got a question and an answer. Both of them are 4 bars long, which is a very, very typical type of phrase structure. And this type of exercise here, separating the melody and the accompaniment and identifying the phrasing, is not only useful for composition, but also for your interpretation. If you know how long the phrases are, then you know when the phrases stop and start, and you can phrase off a little bit. And then if you know where the melody is and where the accompaniment is, you can really fine-tune the balance. So rather than them all being equal like that, we can just really bring out those layers. And then the phrasing here, end of the phrase, new phrase, start of the new one. So as a player, it helps you to have some nuance and understanding about the phrase structure and the balance between the parts. Here we have some work by another member, Rachel. So she has studied this piece, If I Notice, My Dear, That There Is Another Lover. And we spent quite a bit of time working this one out. It's got a lot of interplay between the different voices. So it's a little bit more challenging to say exactly where the melody and the accompaniment are. But instead we really looked at what is happening with the melody, what parts are going to, where is it being given, is it in the top voice and the bottom voice, for how long? And so mapping out this texture a little bit and the melody, we get this, which is called a canvas. This is a plan. It's a plan that is based on the analysis or the study of a piece of music. So once you have this plan in place, it becomes a lot easier to then compose, adding your melody, which is step 2, which is what we're doing this week, second week of January, and then step 3 will be harmonizing. So I'll play this one for you and have a listen. Have a listen to what's happening in the music with the texture, where the parts are going to. There's actually very, very clever, highly crafted writing going on here. So yeah, very beautiful piece there. And we see in the A section, if we had to kind of give it a summary of what's happening, we could say it's very chordal. We've got these voices moving all at the same time. And then in the B section, the voices are very much having a conversation, especially when we get to this point here. And what we actually see is strict imitation. And imitation where the voices will actually come in. So this top voice will enter before the bottom voice is finished saying what it has to say. So it really gives the effect of like an argument. We get and so on. So you can see it's A, G, E, F in the bass voice, and then A, G, E, F in the top voice, in the treble voice, and it's actually quite a strict imitation there, and that carries on until we get to the end. So there's quite a bit of repetition in that. So once you've written one melody, you imitate it in another voice, you're actually making a lot out of a little material. So that kind of information has been mapped into this canvas. Another member, Julie, who is also from the USA, has gone yet a step further. So we actually started kind of at the end with Jamal's example, where he's basically written a complete piece. It's still a draft, but he's got the whole piece, harmony, melody, different textures, different sections are all worked out. And then we looked at Rachel's example, where she studied the piece and she created a canvas, like a plan. Julie is somewhere in between. So she studied composition here and did a bit of an analysis, broke apart the melody to see what's happening in the melody here, created a plan from that, and then composed her own melody. And this, I mean, once you've got a beautiful melody like this all mapped out, you've got the form, you've got the essence of your piece, of your composition, really. So let's have a listen to Julie's melody. So I actually really enjoy just playing the melody on its own. It's really beautifully crafted and very expressive, and has lots of twists and turns and color, and so it's a beautiful job there. And one of the things we talk about when it comes to composing melody, and we actually just had a workshop on this morning, where I discussed how you can use, simply by using scale segments and chord arpeggios, you can create a melody very, very quickly, very easily. And actually, if you study melodies, pretty much any tonal melody will be made of those two things. Will be made of scale fragments or scale segments and chord arpeggios, and that's what we see here in Julie's piece. A really nice balance of the two. You get lots of scale segments are in the key of E minor, so we've got 1 1 7 1, and then we leap up to the 3 and up to the 5th, although she's flattened the 5th there. 1 3 5 is a chord, and then we go down by step down and step down again. So you'll find that most melodies are made of that. And this morning, Rachel, who had never really composed a melody before, was able to very quickly, I think I've still got the work here, was very quickly able to come up with 2 melodies just on the spot. So there's one melody and here's another one. Just by using that concept of scale fragments and chord arpeggios. So it's pretty incredible how once you have that concept, then creativity can all of a sudden just flood out. And I think she said that it was kind of calming to do that, because it is, you're sort of in this really nice creative flow where you're moving your fingers, kind of like practice, but you're also creating as well. It's a really nice experience. So there are a few examples of what's happening in the composition stream at the moment. We also have a composition challenge this month called Chordanuary, which is like a January chord challenge, where we write a short chord progression every day of the month, based on little prompts. So I'll show you these prompts here if I open this link up. So today is the 11th. So the prompt is use minor chords only. So, you could even improvise this too. So if I had to come up with something. Oops, that's a major chord. Right, so that's actually forcing me to do things that I normally wouldn't do. And not that I was 100% happy with what I did there, but it just forces you to try something a little different. So we have a different prompt for each day of the month. Some of these terms you might be very familiar with. Some might be, like French augmented sixth. You might not be as familiar with, but the task is just to try as many as you can. And here are some of the work. This is by Eli, who is from the UK, a very, very talented young guitarist musician from the UK. So here is his prompt 1, using primary chords only. So 1, 4, 5 chords are in the key of D. The primary chords will be D is 1, E, F, G is 4, and A is 5. So we're going to see D, G, and A. And now lots of pieces like this prelude by Bach. For example, that uses 1, 4, 5, 1 in D major on the guitar at the beginning. So it might have some resemblance to that. Let's have a listen to Eli's example. So he'll probably compose this on the 1st of January quite quickly as a challenge. So it's a really beautiful example there. Pretty much could be a composition or at least a little study. Fantastic work. And I tell the members that these make really great sight reading exercises too, because to sight read that and then to know that it's only made of primary chords as a really specific function, purpose to this composition. So prompt number 2, chord substitutions. A little more complicated. I don't want to try and sight read that one. Prompt 3, pickety third, so starting in minor and ending it on major. Prompt 4 is sus4 using suspended fourths. Prompt 5, Italian augmented sixth, cadential 6/4, and so on. Perfect cadence. So Looks like he's jumped ahead to 31 for some reason. Or maybe it's a typo. Maybe it's 11 is meant to be. Let's have a look here. Oh no, yeah, he's jumped ahead to 31. So yeah, you can do that. You can do that in any order you like, skip them. It's a really fun way to get your composition juices flowing. So if we look at the other sort of streams that are happening, we have technical focus on left-hand mechanics and major and minor scale exercises. So these are things, especially this technical focus, that we look at in our masterclasses each week. We have 2 masterclasses every week. And this is what we have been looking at in these masterclasses. So we spent quite a lot of time just discussing these basic mechanics of the left hand. So we talked about the 4 basic muscle groups that we have. And this is really for both hands. We've got our flexors, which move our fingers down, our extensors, which move our fingers out, our abductors, which move our fingers out this way, and our adductors, which move our fingers in this way. And you want to carefully, really carefully control and refine the movement of each one. So if there's unnecessary, for example, extensor movement, like if you play like a scale and you see your fingers flying up, that means you're overusing the extensors. Or if you see your fingers splaying out like that, you're overusing the abductors. So it's a really good specific way to categorize the muscle movements very specifically, or not too specifically, but specific enough so that you have an idea of what to control. Another principle that I really like that we're talking about is that the arm guides the hand. So we often exert too much energy with our left hand fingers. We'll often be squeezing, and we'll often see there'll often be a disconnect between the fingers, the hand, and the arm. But by using the arm, you can actually keep your hand and fingers connected to the arm and also keep them as disengaged as possible, which is a good thing, right? It means as relaxed as possible. So, for example, if we're going to shift up the fretboard, like from the first position, and we want to go to the 7th position, actually using the hand to guide the arm. Sorry, I'm using the arm to guide the hand. I got that the wrong way around. I'm using the arm to guide the hand. I'm actually anticipating a little bit too with the arm. It's almost like a crane. The arm is kind of like a crane that's just bringing the hand to where it needs to go. That means the fingers are functioning consistently too. They're not, because if you don't do that, then your fingers will end up functioning differently in different places on the fretboard. So if I keep my arm in one place here, for example, and I try to shift up, that's going to cause some problems if I don't move the arm. So, and same thing if I move across the fretboard. If I move across the fretboard and don't move the arm, you end up with something like that. So my pinky's flat, all of my fingers are a little bit too flat now, and there's a bend in my wrist. So by moving the arm across this way, you keep the wrist straight, keep it all connected, your fingers are all curled and more consistent. For our technical work, we're focusing on practicing major and minor scales, and specifically these scales by Johann Caspar Merz. And these are really beautiful. I really like these scales because they're very natural. They're not formulaic, they're all a little bit different. They're all very natural for the guitar. And they also come with a beautiful cadence at the end. So here's the first scale, just to have a listen to it. So the purpose of practicing these, one is to get to know the keys. Learning scales is really a good way to get to know key C major, A minor, and then you go to your 1 sharp, G major, E minor, and so on. You have a really good framework for practicing left-hand mechanics, because with scales you're playing individual notes. That means you're using individual fingers, so you can really control those movements of the muscle groups that we talked about, the 4 muscle groups, and using the arm to when you're shifting and that kind of thing. And then you've got these beautiful chords. So, going from single notes to chords is a really good foundational basic contrast. When we play a piece of music, we're often doing that. We're playing a few notes of like a little scale passage, and then a little passage of chords following that, and alternating between the two. So I really like that change, that we get that contrast there. And if you like, you can try out these different fingerings for the right hand as well. If you want to incorporate some more right hand complexity, you can use your standard fingerings or non-standard fingerings, including the thumb and the pinky. And finally, we're looking at 4 stages for learning a piece. We're looking at stage 1 this month. Preparation. So you want to try it, listen and study. Listen to the piece that you're learning. Hopefully you've got a recording. Study it. What's the form? What are the keys? What's the phrase structure? What types of harmonies are being used? Can you find the melody? Can you identify the melody and sing it? Step 2, really, really crucial one, to map fingerings and positions. And we've had some CCG members who've done this and submitted their work, where you actually see them mapping out exactly what position they're playing in the whole way through a piece of music and what fingerings to use. I strongly encourage doing this, because it's one thing to put in your fingerings, like what number fingers you're using, but to put in the positions, that really puts into context why we're using certain fingers. And it really helps you to navigate the fretboard, especially when it's changing positions a lot. And then for rhythm, we're looking at grouping rhythms. So one of the, traps we can get into with rhythm is when we start subdividing and we try to work out rhythm, like every single little rhythm we see, we have to try and work out exactly where it falls when we subdivide the beat. That can be a really tedious and at some point, a really inefficient way to learn rhythm. I've found that a really effective way to learn rhythm is by grouping rhythms and seeing groups. I'll give you an example here. So this is a chart that I created of the most common rhythm groups. So we have basic rhythms, whole notes or semi-breve, minims or half notes, quarter notes, and so on. So you want to be really, really comfortable and fluent at, with these rhythms, playing and saying these rhythms. So one way to help you group them is by speaking these rhythms. Ta, 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 ta. T, 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 T. Triola, 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 triola. Ticka, 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 and so on. So speaking them, playing them, and then eventually you'll start to see groups like this here. We've got, what looks like, if you were sight reading this especially, you might get a little flummoxed by some of the changes of rhythm here. But if you see the groups, you'll observe that there's only 3 groups, 3 different rhythms being used in this whole piece. And you'll find that again and again. Usually once you've identified the first couple of bars and what groups are being used, the majority of the piece will use those same rhythms throughout. So we have ta, and then we have, this is S16. So if we go to S16, tum ti. So ta, tum ti ta, ta, tum ti ta, ta, tum ti. And we've got quavers, so ti, 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 ta, 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 tum, ti, ta, and so on. So only 3 rhythm groups being used, and you can see how it's just, it's like second nature now for me to read the rhythms. Very similar to how we want to read notes and chords. We want to see the larger patterns, the larger groups. It's very much like if we're reading language and we see individual letters, like here. Seeing with rhythm groups. We see words, seeing with rhythm groups, 4 words. If you subdivide your rhythm, you're going to be looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 letters for the first word, and then however many letters there are remaining. So it gets really tedious that way. We need to get past that level Otherwise, you're going to be stuck at this level of reading individual notes, which is the equivalent of being stuck at reading alphabetical letters when you're trying to read English. So we need to get past that and see those larger groups. So that's what we're focusing on for this month. So we've got in year 1, Introduction to Composition, we had a look at a few examples of that. Left-hand mechanics, which we look at in the master classes, major and minor scales to practice, and preparation when learning a piece. And then the only other difference with the year 2 syllabus is that where the subject is sight reading, and we've got also the chord annuary, the chord progression challenge for each day of the month. So that's a little bit of what's happening on CCG, the Creative Classical Guitarist. Love to have you join. This is what it looks like here. There are updates every day from members, even though it's the start of the year, and this is the workshop we had this morning. There is a workshop to watch, another workshop to watch, and then we've got members submitting their work and this great community here. Members submitting work, questions. There's Chord Annuary by Eli, his work there. You can check out, if I go to CCG Collection and I go to Compositions here, we're going to start to see the whole bulk of pieces that have been composed over the past year. It's really quite astounding. If we go to one of these categories, tangos, so we have 6 tangos there. If we go to Alemans, we have quite a number of Alemans there. So these were all composed last year. It's really, really astonishing, and the masterclasses are a lot of fun. We often will hear the new compositions that have been written, played by the composers themselves. That's often what we're doing. So love to have you join, and it's really a very comprehensive program. But by the end of the year, you've really, I think, covered so many foundational areas of playing and musicianship, and it's a really exciting time. So hope to see you on board. You can join with a 1-week free trial if you're interested in giving it a go, and that gives you access to all the workshops. We have 6 hours a week of live workshops, and in addition to that, you can see here on the syllabus, this is this is just the overview here. This is the syllabus. So this is what we did last week. Create your canvas, the dates that we had the sessions. This is a link where you can watch a 2-hour session to get information about what to do. You've got your materials and you've got your tasks. So that's that was for last week. And then for this week, generate melody. So we've got our overview, we've got our dates. We had a session this morning. We've got our video to watch, a couple hours there to watch. We've got our materials and our tasks. And on we go throughout the year. The whole year is mapped out week by week with videos, materials, overviews, and tasks. So it's very, very exciting. All right. Hope to see you around, and thanks for watching. Bye.